I didn't really have anything to record that was like NBA related when I talk about this. So just enjoy footage of me playing Cuphead. Um, I might stream this. Right now I'm gonna go fight the final boss, and then I'm gonna stream myself playing the expert mode. But the reason that I'm here is because I cannot believe the state of the NBA media. It's honestly kind of in shambles. I think just media in general is kind of bad right now because people will just they'll believe absolutely anything that they see, so long as it does one of a few things. It doesn't immediately trip any alarm bells. It reinforces a bias or notion that you might already have, and especially if it makes you angry, people will just eat that shit up. And I have countless examples of not only just like regular people, but now even like analysts are falling for this shit. And I really think this is more of like a media problem in general. But the reason that I highlight this in the NBA is because if we can't even get our sources right for basketball, that doesn't really matter. Like like what does that say about us as a people when it comes to like important shit? If we can't get our reporting right when it comes to the NBA, they can't trust us when it comes to like vaccines or shit like that. Like they're safe and they're trustworthy, but who's gonna believe us, right? Because people will just believe anything that they see without giving it a second thought. And I don't even think that having a blue check mark means that you're safe because people with blue check marks can also retweet garbage. And I just think that we really need to do our due diligence here because like I think it's funny and like you post a fake quote here or there and there's no issue with that. But imagine if we would do this like with politicians or like I mean I guess that is kind of Donald Trump's whole career, just making shit up and hoping it sticks, but like if everyone did that, we'd be fucked. So that's why I support like the whole like NBA fake quotes thing is because there are no real consequences. Ideally, hopefully, right? And that's where we get into this area. The reason that I'm recording this video is because people have been sacked before, and I don't have a problem with it. I still don't. Um, but it's getting to the point where like NBA analysts who like quote unquote are supposed to be trustworthy and like verify their sources, they'll just see a tweet and they'll be like, "Oh, okay, this is good enough to put on television. This is good enough to reference in a debate." And I don't want to attack Perk because it's not like he's a bad guy. Everyone makes mistakes. People bash Perk all the time. They say he's an idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm not really one of those people. I think he is has been wrong, but so has everyone else. I think he has bad takes, but again, so does everyone. I think people just single out Perk because he's bombastic and his takes, they get attention, but not in like a bad way where he's like seeking it. It's just like, oh wow, he actually believes that. That's kind of crazy, and that's a good thing to have. You want to have people who are good, genuine, and honest in this business. That's kind of my whole point here, is that people who are good and they're honest, we need more of. The problem is that a lot of good, honest people are good and honest, but they're also like a little naive, you know. And that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world. I think it's better to be too kind than too cruel. But jeez, man, really? Like, it's ball sack sports, my guy. Like, come on. I think we need to do a little better than that, right? And it's not even like Perk is like the biggest victim. He's just the latest one. But I think the worst one by far was the Josh Smith scenario because fucking Fox News took that and ran with it. Like, it doesn't matter to them that Josh Smith was drafted like 2 years after LeBron James. They don't care. It's about making their guy who they don't like look bad and calling him soft because that's their goal is to either emasculate a strong black man like LeBron James or just to make him look like you know a non-desirable. They'll be like, oh, he supports BLM. He needs to shut up and dribble. It's either that Or, oh, he's too soft. He isn't like Michael Jordan. He's too political. That's their narrative. That's their angle. So they see one fake quote that reconfirms that bias, a negative bias, which is the strongest bias that there is, and I'll go into that more in a bit. It is incredible how I know it's Fox News and that they're kind of a shit rag, but like especially like a major news outlet when it comes to sports information, you'd think that somebody would do the due diligence of like looking at this and being like, we can just ask him if he said this. We could interview him. We could talk about it. We could go further. We don't have to just take quotes on face value. But that's what we do because we're Fox News and we peddle in reactions and they're not the only outlet to do it. They won't be the first and they won't be the last. But I just think it's funny that they did it in the context that they did it. And not everything is like a racist attack. Not everything is like makes everything look bad. Sometimes they have a narrative that isn't necessarily like a toxic evil narrative, but something that has to be pushed. Like the whole MJ thing. Like I think MJ is like top two, but the way people worship him in the media is absurd. So if you put out a fake quote being like, "Oh yeah, LeBron James said that he's way better than Michael Jordan, and there's not even a debate," and what yada yada yada, a certain population of people are gonna gravitate towards that and not fact check it and just roll with it because it confirms their negative bias. If I told you, oh yeah, Stephen Curry, he loves puppies, you're not gonna want to verify that because who gives a shit? It's positive. It's cool. Like great. I like puppies too. So what? Like nobody wants to verify information that they necessarily agree with that is innocuous. But when it comes to things like this that are negative, even if it's about a basketball player where it's completely meaningless in the long run, people will just eat it up, and it's kind of astounding. And you can make the argument like, yeah, well, people do their diligence when it's things that are important, but when it's the NBA, they don't really care. They just retweet whatever. And there's truth to that, but there's just as much proof that the opposite is the case, that people are only applying due diligence when it comes to irrelevant shit. But when it comes to things that actually matter, they just don't care, right? People who were just like, oh, I don't care about politics because like their newsfeed is just garbage. Like they don't know what's actually going on. People in the age of information are becoming more misinformed than any village idiot in the Middle Ages ever could have dreamed of, right? Because that village idiot did not have access to all of the world's idiots and fools in a global network. But now it exists. It's called Twitter. And we can do whatever we want. And it's honestly astounding. And I think it's kind of a crime against nature and God himself. But you know what? I don't make the rules. And if we want to go down this path where everyone's an idiot, by all means, I will take us there. Because guess what? If you fall for these quotes, if you see a Boss X Sports quote, and you don't do diligence and you just regurgitate it without thinking, it's your fault. And I'll go further. We have the right to make fun of you. And we will enjoy it, and it'll be funny because you're an idiot. And it's easy to say that because it's really not hard to just look at the account, like, and then ask yourself, would this person actually say this shit? And the answer, like, 9 times out of 10 is no. But, Ballsack, what they do is they evolve. And I'm using them as, like, an example because they're, like, the most popular one out there. But, like, there's other accounts. There's Ask Sweat Hoops and there's other accounts. But it's the same concept. It's can we get people to believe the most outlandish things if we present that in the least outlandish casing? It's like a hot dog of nonsense in a casing of sanity. Like, that's the best way I can put it. And like every once in a while, they'll retweet like an actual quote that's ridiculous, and people will be like, "Oh, okay, so that's an actual quote. So maybe they have actual quotes." No, that's how they get you, bro. That is how they get you, and they fall for it, hook, line, and sinker. And I really think that if we had any significant media literacy in this country, we wouldn't have problems like this. But we live in a country, or this isn't like mostly an America thing, because like that's where I'm assuming most of this is based out of. But it's a global issue as well, and I only speak of America because that's my experience. But The literacy in this country when it comes to things like finding verifiable sources and like verifiable information, it is astoundingly bad. Like the fact that millions of people actually believe that there was a fucking a CP operation in the bottom of a pizzeria is astounding. Like any other civilized country, like people would that would be like the biggest story of like the decade is like how did all these idiots fall for this? But if I tell you it was Americans, you just go, "Oh yeah, of course it was Americans," because who else would it be? Who else would fall for something so preposterous? It's only us, bro. Like it's other countries like have people like this, but when it comes to like a nationwide sentiment of just not knowing better, it's kind of crazy, bro. People will just about the most outlandish things. Like people here actually believe that we're the only country that exists, and like fucking ancient Egypt was a fairy tale. Like that never actually happened. Like people like this actually exist. So when you see them fall for fake quotes, it's like it's surprising, right? But is it though? Is it really surprising that people will believe any random bullshit? I argue no. And taking advantage of that to get some ad revenue is it's one thing if you're doing this like maliciously, you're not publicizing it, you're like people you're trying to pass it off as real. That's bad. Everyone knows that's bad. But if your account name is fucking ballsack sports and you put it in your account that you're a parody and people are still falling for it, yeah, that's on them. We have to do due diligence as people to verify. We were adults. I hope, I assume. Most of us finished middle school at the very least, because that's when I was learning, like, hey, we can just get things off Google if we want, but if you want to make sure you find multiple people verifying this from different angles, all saying the same thing, right? You wouldn't take one guy's word on 2 plus 2 being 4 if it wasn't that obvious. It is, but that's maybe a bad example. You wouldn't take some guy's word on the sky being blue if you've never seen the sky before. You'd either go look at it yourself, which is pretty easy to do, or get proof of it. Verifiable proof from multiple sources, or, your own eyes. If you don't even need to verify sources to know that LeBron James would survive in Josh Smith's era and that Josh Smith would never fucking say that because he's Josh Smith. Like think about it for a second, bro. It's unreal. It's unreal. Like and I think the same thing applies to politics too, because people let their hatred of one group, whether it's the Celtics, whether it's fucking Republicans, like they let that one driving force control how they see the world. And I think that it's the same polarization that we've been seeing in the last 2 years in this country. It's the same lack of verifiable sources. It's astounding the things people will believe. And that's kind of all I had to say, really.